Now let us read the next stanza. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. Let us understand the word meanings. So the first word, the free bird thinks of another breeze. Breeze is a light movement of the air or a very gentle wind. Then trade winds. So trade winds are the steady winds that blow in a specific directions, often like found near the Earth's equator, and it blows towards the equator and then to the west direction. Next comes through the sighing trees. So sighing is what? Sighing trees are the sound produced by the leaves of tree when a strong wind, which wind? The trade wind blows. So that is the sighing trees, the sound of the leaves. Next, the fat worms, like healthy worms, well-fed worms, waiting on a dawn bright lawn. So dawn is the early morning when the sun starts to rise. And bright is like this lawn. Bright lawn means the grass is lit because of the shine of the sun, because the sun is just rising and the lawn is brightly shining. This stanza, children, is again describing how the free bird thinks about taking a flight again in another gentle breeze, and the soothing trade winds that blow through the trees and making a sound. The leaves of the trees are making sound, and the idea, like no, and the fat worm waiting on a dawn bright lawn. So it is the idea of finding healthy and big worms on a bright lawn in the early morning, on which this free bird can feed itself. It has the source for its nourishment. There is no foundation for him. This bird can feed itself from wherever it wants, and it has enough resources for that. Next is, and he names the sky his own. So the bird has a sense of ownership over the sky, as it thinks there's no other bird who can compete with this free bird. So indirectly, actually, this is showing us the free bird's thoughts and aspirations once again. And this is in contrast with the experiences of the caged bird that we just now read in stanza 2 and 3. So this stanza begins by presenting the contrasting perspective of the free bird. Contrast with what? The caged bird. So it thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing tree. So it is again thinking about flying towards its destination and towards the sky. So this image evokes a sense of serenity, a serene atmosphere around this bird, and it is actually representing the freedom and natural harmony in which this bird is enjoying its freedom. The birds' thoughts are focused on the beauty and the peacefulness of the surrounding in which this bird is resting in the morning. Now, the mention of the fat worms. Okay, it is adding a touch of like natural imagery. You can think of the worms crawling on the grass and the bird feeding on them. So it suggests the abundance. The poet is purposely using the word fat worm. Like they are not some like no malnourished worms. That means the resources that this bird has for its nourishment are good, healthy. Okay, so this fat worm, this word actually suggests the abundance and the ease with which the first this free bird can access its basic needs. It doesn't have to struggle to fulfill its basic needs. And the last line, the free bird shows the free bird's sense of ownership. This line, he names the sky his own, indicates the free bird's confidence and entitlement that yes, it belongs to me. I deserve it. No one can take this away from me. So, this entitlement to claim the vast expanse of the sky as its own domain. It emphasizes the bird's empowerment and the privileges that this bird is enjoying without any restrictions. So, if you notice, this is in complete contrast with the caged bird. So, in other words, the poet is telling the readers that the white Americans are enjoying all the freedom that is required for the a person's well-being. They have the access to all the resources, their food, their livelihood, everything without any difficulty, without any problem. This stanza again shows us the main theme of this poem, and that is freedom versus enslavement. So, if you think about the condition of the caged bird. The caged bird is suffering so much in the confinement, whereas the free bird is thinking about another flight. That means the free bird has selfish wishes and he thinks of more and more freedom, whereas the caged bird can only sing with a fearful trill. Okay, so what it shows, like, it shows that the caged bird condition is so distressed full that the caged bird becomes a symbol of pain and suffering, whereas the free bird is enjoying so much, and in spite of that it is longing for more and more freedom. Next stanza. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. Let us understand the difficult word meanings. In the first line, grave of dreams. So, what is a grave? A grave is where a dead body is buried or burnt. So, in this case, the grave of dreams symbolize the loss of the caged bird's dreams. Next is his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. So, nightmare is something a disturbing or a frightening dream that can cause fear or anxiety. That kind of scream, a very dangerous and frightening scream this bird is making. His wings are clipped. So, clipped means to cut something. His feet are tied. So, here tied means his movement is restricted. He is in a limitation. Next is so he opens his throat to sing. So, opening his throat to sing means the cage bird is using its voice to express despite being in the captivity. Let's understand the meaning of this stanza. Again, this stanza is starting with the word but in order to create a contrasting picture between the free bird in the previous stanza, which is thinking of another breeze. It's already free, but it wants more and more freedom. Whereas the bird in the cage is suffering more and more. So the opening line, but a caged bird stands on the grave of tree. It evokes a sense of despair and hopelessness. The cage in which this bird is living has now become the grave of this bird's dreams. So it all suggests that the bird's dreams, aspirations, and the potential all have been worried and lost due to this restriction in which the bird is living. The word grave has been used intentionally by the poet in order to emphasize on the weight of the bird's unfulfilled desire, how much pain this bird is feeling due to the unfulfilled dreams. Next line, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. This further intensifies the feeling of suffering and pain of this caged bird. This shows the deep pain and anguish and frustration of the caged bird. The word nightmare is also representing a sense of horror and the like too much suffering of this bird. Why the poet is using the word shadow? Because the society is neglecting the African Americans in order to show that it is showing that yes, we are not seen by the society, but we do exist. So, in simple words, the poet describes the bird's cries as that of someone having a nightmare. That kind of feeling this caged bird is having. Next, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Now, not only that this bird is in confinement, but his physical freedom has also been taken away by clipping its wings. Like no, even if it gets its freedom, it doesn't have the ability to fly or move freely. His feet are tied. It also emphasizes on the confinement and the immobility of the bird. It is not free to move anywhere now. Its dreams are dying in this cage. So this creates a sense of captivity and the oppression that was faced by the African Americans during Jim Crow laws application. Next, so he opens his throat to sing. Now, see, despite all these constraints, all these restrictions, all these confinements, the caged bird finds empowerment in its song. The line, so he opens his throat to sing, it reveals the bird's determination that though I am in confinement, but I will not stop raising my voice for my freedom. So, singing becomes an act of resistance against the limitations that are imposed upon this bird. In other words, the restrictions that have been imposed on the black African Americans in the year 1965. This entire stanza, children, is depicting the conditions of the African Americans due to the application of the Jim Crow laws, and they show a profound sense of loss, suffering, and confinement that these people are facing. And it also illustrates the suppression of their dreams and the pain that these people are experiencing because of these discriminatory laws. And it also highlights that, see, we are facing the difficulties, we are facing this pain, but we are resilient, we have the power that we will raise our voice. Even though the caged bird, or in other words the African Americans, live a harsh life, they continue to persevere, and they are unwilling to surrender to their uh, opponents, the white Americans in this case. And they still long for freedom. And in this song, in this poem, Maya Angelou is ending on a positive note that, see, in spite of facing these many difficulties, these many sufferings, we will not stop fighting for our rights, and we'll keep raising our voice. So this stanza underscores the strength and spirit that can emerge even in the most oppressive circumstances. We must never lose hope. We must keep fighting, whether the conditions are good or bad. We should stand up for our rights. That's what Maya Angelou is conveying to her fellow citizens in her community. Last stanza of this poem. The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So this is basically the repetition of the previous stanza in order to emphasize on the condition or the situation in which this cage bird is, and in spite of being in these despairing or the hopeless conditions, or despite being in the confinement, despite being under the restrictions, this bird is not losing hope, and it sings in order to let the other people in faraway places know about its song of freedom. This stanza is reinforcing Maya Angelou's message that we will raise our voice against oppression by the society. And in spite of being in the harsh and painful conditions, the bird is not losing its dignity. And this bird knows its strength and use it in order to express its rebellion. And the medium this bird has chosen is singing. The singing is a symbolic of his rebellion against oppression and against the discrimination in the society. So this song creates a sense of hope and the inner strength that this bird has, that it is not losing hope in spite of being in a painful condition. And the struggle of the cage bird is parallel to the African American struggle for freedom and equality. And by raising the voice, it is sending the message in other parts of the world in order to get recognized and get the well deserved freedom for the community. The African Americans wrote and sang and danced and cried out for freedom, though initially they were heard as a distant voice. But they did not stop them from raising their voice against discrimination faced by them due to the color of their skin until they were given equal rights as the whites. So this is how the poem is closing, and at the end, it is having a positive note that his tunes, the caged bird's tunes, will be heard at some distant hill, and he will definitely get the freedom that he deserves. I will be covering the remaining points like theme, the literary devices that have been used in this poem, as well as the most important key words, key points in one more video that you can check later. So thank you so much for watching, and do like, share, and subscribe my channel. This will encourage me to create good content for all of you.